If we can stick to these measures, we know we can protect each other, slow the spread of the virus and support our health service. Remember, while we may have to stay physically apart, we are all in this together. By staying at home, you play your part in this crisis. Keep up with your friends, family and neighbours as best you can in different ways, because that is important too. And later on, we will brief you on measures and supports available through your community for those who are cocooning and particularly vulnerable at this time. So I'm going to begin with business supports. The temporary wage subsidy scheme introduced by government is going well, and again we encourage employers to register for the scheme, which means their employees stay in a job and employers will be ready to get back to business when we get through the current situation. There are almost 36,000 employers now registered with revenue for the scheme. Registration increased by over 10,000 in the 48 hours between Monday morning and Wednesday morning. Revenue is reimbursing payments made under the scheme to the relevant employers within 2 working days. Today, Revenue has generated further funds under the scheme worth €20.3 million. These payments will be in the bank accounts of the majority of the respective employers tomorrow, and the cumulative value of payments made under the scheme is now €54 million. As I've mentioned previously, there are a range of other supports in terms of guidance available for business at this time, and all of those details are available on gov.ie. An information notice and revised frequently asked questions document for employers and employees on COVID-19 related supports can now be accessed on gov.ie. You'll get the basic information on the income supports now available, together with answers to the most commonly asked questions, and they've just been updated. We wish to thank customers who submitted their application for the COVID-19 pandemic unemployment payment online through the www.gov.ie website. Between the 12th and the 31st of March, over 225,000 applications were submitted online, and this remains the most effective and efficient way of submitting an application for income support. We are aware of the issues with the number of applications for the payment. The impacted applicants have been contacted and the issues are being addressed. We encourage the completion of online applications through gov.ie, as that will reduce the chance of error. The Minister for Finance, Public Expenditure and Reform, Paschal Donohoe, will hold a press conference today at 1:45, and in this the Minister will outline the end of quarter Exchequer statement on the March Exchequer figures. COVID-19 response from Board BIA. So Board BIA is widening its marketing grant schemes, which is targeted at food, drink and horticultural producers in response to the difficulties companies are facing as a result of the COVID-19 crisis. And further details are available on gov.ie. Elsewhere in the agricultural sector, a number of flexibilities to schemes run by the Department of Agriculture, Food and the Marine have been put in place in response to the COVID-19 crisis. These flexibilities are being introduced to make it easier for farmers and their agents to continue to participate in these important schemes where difficulties arise due to the current public health restrictions. For inspections, routine on-farm visits have generally been paused for 2 weeks. However, some essential inspections may be necessary and will take place. Revised arrangements have been put in place for submitting applications for transferring basic pay entitlements where witnessed signatures are required. Additional flexibilities have also been introduced in the area of TB testing arrangements, and we wish to facilitate farmers in continuing efforts to eradicate TB and undertake testing as required. We also wish to continue to facilitate animal movements and the continuity of all elements of the food supply chain. The overriding principle in all situations is that the health and safety of farmers, vets, service providers, contractors and other staff and their families is paramount. The Horse Racing Ireland Board yesterday announced the closure of the 2019-20 National Hunt season and the cancellation of the Fairyhouse and Punchestown festivals. Like many other sectors, the racing and breeding industry in Ireland will take an economic blow from the fallout of the COVID-19. Government are working with Horse Racing Ireland to limit the long-term impact of this pandemic. We know that jobs will be lost in key rural industries and that the viability of some industry institutions will come under threat. A strategy that would allow Irish racing to return as quickly as possible once it is appropriate to do so and within government guidelines was discussed yesterday, and a significantly enhanced national hunt programme has been planned for October to December, with the 2020 Irish Grand National also to be rearranged for the winter period. We are aware that the cancellation of key horse racing events, along with other sporting and cultural events, is a significant disappointment for a variety of enthusiasts out there who will see their beloved annual fixtures in their lives disrupted. And we want to remind you at this time that these measures are unfortunate necessities in our fight to protect our communities and to save lives. So on the international front, while our focus at the moment is very much on our local communities and the support of the most vulnerable, it's important to note we are also continuing to contribute to global humanitarian causes, and in particular, global efforts to address the COVID-19 pandemic. Yesterday, the Irish Government provided €10 million in funding to the United Nations Global Humanitarian Response Plan. This plan will help particularly vulnerable countries in their response to the virus. Ireland's allocation to the UN appeal is part of our support for the work of all of those across the world who are saving lives in these most challenging of circumstances. This donation of aid will serve as a reminder that we are united on a global scale in the fight against COVID-19. And in practical terms, the WHO Health Organisation have been really clear: none of us are safe until everyone is safe. In terms of Irish citizens abroad, Irish citizens who are abroad and have concerns about COVID-related matters can contact the Department of Foreign Affairs on our dedicated phone line at 3531 613 1733 if you're calling outside of Ireland. This helpline has fielded nearly 14,000 calls over the month of March. Currently, we're trying to help over 1,000 of our citizens in 86 countries who are seeking assistance to return to Ireland. Many are small groups, but there are large numbers in Australia and a couple of hundred in New Zealand, and we're working with all of those. In terms of cross-border cooperation, at 2:30 p.m. today, Minister Ross will hold a teleconference with the Minister for Infrastructure in Northern Ireland and the Minister for Infrastructure in Wales. The meeting will provide an opportunity to discuss issues of common interest in the transport field, and specifically the response to the COVID-19 crisis. And this will have a particular focus on the critical supply chain issues, which remain one of government's highest priorities at this time. We've heard some concerns around rent increases or notification of rent increases. So just to confirm, emergency measures mean that there should be no rent increases for 3 months from Thursday the 27th of March. And once again, we ask landlords at this time to show forbearance with their tenants. So we also, I mentioned previously concerns we've had about fraudsters that may try to take advantage of this very unusual situation we find ourselves in. An Garda Síochána have asked us to remind you to be careful about COVID-19 related fraud and scams. There are those out there who will attempt to take advantage of people's fear at this time, and the Gardaí are encouraging people to be cautious in the following circumstances. Beware of anyone calling to your house offering services in relation to COVID-19. This includes services for COVID-19 tests. Health service executive staff, ambulances, nurses, paramedics, doctors will not call to your house unless you've been in touch with them first. Also beware of bogus charity collectors. There should not be anyone carrying out street or door-to-door collections at this time. If you're approached, please report it to An Garda Síochána. Also beware of emails and online requests and online advertisements, particularly those offering COVID-19 related tests and products. Don't click on unsolicited links. And we're really conscious that people are online maybe more than they usually are, so that's something to be particularly aware of. Always double check before transferring any money or buying any product, and that includes businesses making online payments. And always report any activity you think might be unusual or fraudulent. It's never too late to report a fraud, but timely reporting makes it more likely there's an opportunity to try and step in and save you your money. And I just wanted to mention also we had a do not drink notice in Clare on the INA Group water scheme, and that was lifted yesterday morning. And then my final note for today is that the CMO is back at his desk. So I'm now going to introduce the community briefing that we have this morning. And this is an introduction on Ireland's community response to the COVID-19 crisis. I have mentioned in previous briefings that the local authority fora, which have been set up to mobilise communities at local level, and they have been put in place to support people who are most vulnerable during this time. To brief us further on that, I would like to welcome Taoiseach the Minister for Foreign Affairs and Trade, Simon Coveney TD, Minister for Rural and Community Development, Michael Ring TD, Minister of State for Local Government, John Paul Phelan TD, and Anne-Marie Farrell, Chief Executive of Fingal County Council.
Good morning, everybody. I want to express profound and sincere thanks, as we do every day, to everybody who is helping in this crisis, from frontline staff in medical and essential services to everyone who is simply observing medical advice. The message stays strong, staying apart so that we can stay together, working together so that we can stop the spread of this virus. Right across the country, people are looking out for each other, checking on elderly neighbours, making phone calls, offering practical help. This is our community in action. Neighbour looking after neighbour. Community has never been more important than it is right now. I have an unshakable belief in the resilience of our society and in the power of community. In the end, community is what will get us through this crisis, on a local and on a national level. I can't overstate the importance that the government attaches to the power of community action in this crisis. We're asking the most senior public servants in every county and every city to oversee a new initiative that we're announcing today. Supporting community action is now a core priority for government action in the face of COVID-19. In Ireland, we understand the word community as activity, and specifically activity that is directed towards the common good. Community is about much more than merely belonging to something. It's about doing something together that makes belonging to a community matter. It's the sense of collective rather than individual. The public response to COVID-19 has been inspirational to date. Sustaining our sense of community will be vitally important as this crisis evolves and develops, as it will. And it will be vitally important that when the immediate crisis has passed, that the rebuilding of our lives and our economy begins. Today, I'm announcing a major national and local initiative called the Community Call. It's a partnership of national government, local government and the community and voluntary sectors right across the country. It will coordinate community activity, direct community assistance, and where it's needed, it will marshal a volunteering response in every town, parish, county and city in the country. The work of Community Call will be focused on specific needs, and it will also be broad-ranging in its reach and its scope. The focus right now will be the elderly and vulnerable communities, people who are most affected by the new restrictions announced last weekend, whether they be older people, whether they be people with weak immune systems, people with a disability, perhaps their lone parents who aren't able to get out because they can't bring children with them. In the coming weeks, we will focus on broader well-being issues in our society with a range of new initiatives as the crisis continues. At national level, Community Call will be overseen by a group from the Department of the Taoiseach, the Department of Housing, Planning and Local Government, the Department of Rural and Community Development, the Department of Health, and the County and City Management Association. At a local level, Community Call will be overseen and managed by our local authorities. There will be a network of 31 Community Call offices, stretching from Kerry to Donegal and from Dublin to Mayo. And when I say we will, I mean it's happening now. This is happening everywhere from today. Every local authority has now established a community forum to coordinate and connect a wide range of services and supports. The forum involves an extensive list of state and voluntary and community organisations, and sporting organisations too. Minister Ring will give some more detail in a few minutes. This is an unprecedented mobilisation of state and voluntary resources to combat the effects of a crisis that has come on us so suddenly and so unexpectedly. I am convinced, though, that our communities will be the decisive factor in protecting and restoring our society and our economy in the weeks and months ahead, bringing us to a better future. In the face of this national emergency, it will be how we respond as communities, how we look after our friends and our neighbours, that may well be decisive. Ireland, in my view, has stronger communities than any other country in the world. This crisis and this emergency will test that network and that resilience, but I am confident that our communities will respond, linked to this initiative, in a way that will save lives and help many, many people across this island. So I'll pass you over to Michael Ring now, who'll give a bit more detail.
Thank you, Taoiseach. I want to thank everyone who is making a personal sacrifice to get us through this crisis. Following the guidelines, slowing the spread of the virus, that alone is an important contribution. By staying indoors, you are part of the national effort. Like the Taoiseach, I have no doubt that we will succeed, and I have no doubt that community will be the core reason for that success. I want to give you some more information about the Community Forum, the body that will underpin the work of the Community Call all around the country. There will be a Community Forum in every single county. It will include the HSE and the heads of the community departments and the local community development committees. It will also include the community champions. These are people with strong links within the local areas who have already been in contact with the people that the Community Call seeks to support and protect. On Garda Síochána, the local volunteer centres, the local development companies, the Red Cross, Civil Defence, the GEA, the IFA, the Public Participation Network, Age Friendly Network, Local Link Citizens Information, Migrant Forum, church organisations, all of these are part of the forum and all have a role to play. But there is one organisation that is central to Community Call, which I want to single out, alone. It is an organisation that already understands the problem of isolation now being caused by people being affected by this virus. The Alone helpline that will be the national phone number for the Community Call, for which call will be redirected to the local authorities. I want to give you an assurance that the local authority resources are in place, staffing has been upgraded, helplines and help desks have been set up, case management systems are operating so that every request or offer of assistance will be logged and followed through. The Taoiseach is right when he says that the community is about action. Today we are coordinating our actions for the common good. This is now a structure in place that will help us all to be more effective. I'm asking everyone to use this structure. Pick up the phone, talk to the people with experience and find out where your contribution can be best. I want to say to people out there today, people that feel isolated, people that are alone, people that are living in rural Ireland, we will be there to help you. Nobody will be left behind. Do not be afraid. I'm calling on neighbours and the Taoiseach to talk today about community. The most important aspect in this is neighbours, because every neighbour knows each other and people trust their neighbour. And I'm asking neighbours today to take up the phone, and everybody has a phone and has a mobile phone now, and ring your neighbour to see that they're okay. Give them your number and say, make that call if you need it. Do not be afraid. The state is there, the government is there, the voluntary organisations is there, everybody is there to help. My department today are also announcing a senior alert scheme, which will be, we have 80,000 people that participate in that. And regular calls and checks on their well-being will be made from Pobble to see that their senior alert pingent is working. They will get that call. So if you get that call and you want support, you want help, give the details to that caller and they will pass it on to the people that you need or want. Again, to our neighbours, I want to say, support one another in this difficult time. My department is also launching a brochure here today, advice for people giving support. And this is very important that they read this, because people have to be careful when they're helping their elderly loved one. And people also must realise, people are saying, well, we can't leave our house. If it's for a need and for help for your neighbour, you can leave your house to support your neighbour. Advice for people who need support. That advice and that leaflet will be sent out today to everybody will be getting that. In relation to my department, we're coordinating the voluntary centres. Anybody who wants help will get help. And anybody that makes that call, the volunteer centre will put them in touch with the people that need to be helped. And I'll say this again to the elderly people, the vulnerable people that are afraid out there. I know that you're getting messages on media that frightens you. I know that you're getting it on Facebook that's frightening you. I want to say again to the people on Facebook, stop putting up messages that are not true. Don't be frightening our vulnerable people in this country. This is a very difficult time for everybody, and I want to say that message loud and clear. Please do not be putting messages on Facebook, and I say to Facebook that you have a responsibility as well to make sure that these messages should not be going up. To the national media, the local media, I want to say thank you for the great coverage that you're giving it. I want to thank you for the advice that you're giving communities. And watching the programmes on both television and radio, you're showing there that the postman, that the supports are there, the community sector is there. Again, I'll finish on this message. Do not be afraid. The state is there for you, the support is there for you, the help is there for you. Just make the call. Thank you.
Thank you, and good morning, everyone. I wanted to join with my two colleagues in expressing my gratitude and sincere thanks to everybody who's been involved in this tremendous national effort over the last few weeks and indeed into the weeks to come. In particular, in their efforts to keep us safe and to keep people connected. As someone who comes from a very rural background, deeply aware of the problems of social isolation and the role of community in addressing those problems. As Minister Ring said, neighbours are fantastic. And even in the course of the last few weeks, we've seen new generations of people getting used to using social media in terms of contacting their families, their friends, and indeed in some cases grandkids. I would urge people too to pick up the phone to their neighbour who may be feeling isolated and ensure that their local needs are met. Like my colleagues, I've no doubt that community action and community values will get us through this crisis. I want to make one additional observation. We've 31 local authorities across the country. The COVID-19 crisis and the community call response that we're announcing today draw attention to the unique role that local authorities can play right across the length and breadth of the country. There is no other arm of the state that reaches into every community, be they urban or rural, and even isolated rural communities. Our local authorities are much more than service providers. Their organisational skills and the deep community knowledge that they have through their staff are crucial and will be crucial in this time of national crisis. Our local authorities are very important, even in normal times, to the well-being of our communities. Every day, they coordinate vast amounts of activities that take place in those communities. And that's why they will be and are the lead group for delivering in terms of the community forums which have been established, following on from the additional comments by the Taoiseach last Friday in relation to extra measures being put in place. But in this crisis, our local authorities are making direct interventions to keep us safe and to keep people connected. With this initiative, they will also be coordinating the efforts of others and connecting people and organisations to each other. Organisations, whether they're other state agencies, other government departments, or other community organisations that Minister Ring has outlined. I believe when this crisis has passed, our local authorities, along with many others, will have earned a new level of respect and admiration. Successful operation of the community call is now the top priority for every one of the 31 chief executives and chairs and Cathaoirligh, and indeed all of the elected members of every local authority. Every city and county is ready to go, and a team and a dedicated phone number is now in place. And I'd ask people to ensure, if they can online, to check gov.ie for those numbers for each individual local authority. As Minister Ring said, nationally the alone phone number is being used, and also it is intended that, and in fact yesterday, contact was made with the management of each local radio station in the country, of which I think there are 31, and there will be a series of advertisements that will be run on each local radio station, and indeed on national media also.
Thank you, Minister. Marie Farrell from Fingal would like to make a few comments on it.
Good morning, everybody. I also want to thank everyone who is helping to push back on the COVID-19 virus. I'm here as one of 31 chief executives of our local authorities, and to tell you that we're really and totally committed to the community call. Community building is actually what we do. We build and maintain social and physical infrastructure that supports our communities and enables our communities to flourish and self-help. Community call will be our absolute priority in the coming weeks, and it will be my personal priority and that of every chief executive of local authorities in the country. There are big actions involved and small but crucially important interventions. A practical example of a small but important intervention in Fingal is that we have a Meals on Wheels service. Many of our volunteers are over 70. Now they are cocooned, so we need new volunteers to step in for this time. Community call gives us the structure to solve this kind of problem. And of course, we very much look forward to all our usual volunteers returning to their roles as soon as possible. Community call shines a light on both the needs of our communities and the volunteering resources that are out there, and enables us to bring them together. Community call shines a light on both the needs of our communities and the volunteering resources. The Community Call Forum, repeated 31 times throughout the country, will be a massive shared resource. We will also help structure volunteering, use Garda-vetted volunteers, and ensure that each volunteer carries an authorisation. I'm so pleased to be part of this joined-up initiative that enables us all to be more effective, to learn from each other, and to connect with each other and to serve our communities better, especially the elderly and the vulnerable, for whom this is a really difficult and anxious time. The Taoiseach's words give me hope that we are all learning something very important in this crisis, that community really matters, and that we can make life better for everyone by coming together and by thinking together and by acting together.
Thank you very much, Anne-Marie. Thank you, Ministers. We have questions at the microphone coming around, so we'll start with Casey here for broadcast. Please.
Just two quick ones. Can you maybe give some examples of the kind of things that the elderly, vulnerable people or lone parents, as you said, that can get assistance with? I know some people think that the things they've needed help with have been too trivial with, so maybe some examples might help. Yeah. And then secondly, is it, I suppose, a fair assumption that these measures around cocooning will go beyond the initial 2 weeks they were announced for if you're announcing such a big initiative?
Yeah. Oh, sorry.
Go ahead, yeah.
Yeah, no, well, I mean, I think practical examples are, around getting the groceries, getting medicines from pharmacies. I mean, the truth is that we are asking quite a significant portion of our population to stay at home and not leave their homes under virtually any circumstances. So if you're over the age of 70, we're asking you to stay in your home. If you're someone with a very weak immune system, we want you to stay in your home to protect yourself. And so when you self-isolate, you do need community or family or some structure to ensure that you get the provisions you need and the support that you need in isolation. Of course, that emotional support from neighbours and friends and family can happen by phone, but I think some of the practical things may need to be delivered through the kind of structure that we're talking about now, if there isn't a neighbour to do it. The advantage of this structure is that people can trust it absolutely. The people who will be leaving a box on your doorstep with a meal or with provisions will be people who've been vetted and people who are connected with a trusted system that is a partnership effectively between the community and voluntary sector and local authorities. So people need to know that they can trust this. As Michael Ring said, no one's alone here. Ireland is going to come together and is already coming together as a network of communities that are going to support each other through this period. And I think that's a message that we really want to get out today. Yes, neighbour supporting neighbour, but if there is something needed beyond that, we now have a structure that people can fully trust and believe in and can access easily.
I'll give you just two simple examples. We have Rural Link. Now that people cannot go into town to pick up their medicine or pick up their shopping or in some cases whatever they need. The Rural Link are now actually making calls to these houses. They're actually bringing them out their groceries, bringing them out their medication. The Meals on Wheels, for example, they are now again asking people what supports, what helps, what do they need. People are frightened, and they're frightened particularly because we're in a crisis. But they're now beginning to realise that there's community. And as the Taoiseach has said, I come also from rural Ireland, but also in urban Ireland, we have people that are isolated, people that may feel that they don't have anybody to provide this service for them. We have, with the Wheel and Irish Rural Link, the Wheel are the national organisation in relation to communities. We have so many community groups out there working with people, public participation. These are people that work with the local authorities. We have the leader companies. 8,500 people volunteered last week. That's exactly what we're at today, trying to coordinate that. If people need help, the volunteer centres will be able to get the people that's required. And as the Taoiseach has said, people have to be very careful because already the criminals are thinking outside the box and they're watching every opportunity to get an opportunity to rob rural people and urban people when they get that opportunity. And I know the Gardaí have been very vigilant, and I want to compliment the Gardaí and compliment everybody that's keeping an eye out for the neighbours. The crucial thing, again, is neighbours know neighbours. They trust their neighbours. And there's one thing in this country, whenever the cry went out for help, the Irish people always responded, whether it was at home or abroad for home. They've always responded, and I know that the Irish people will respond again. A simple message today, because I know it from the phone calls I'm getting to my office, from the phone calls I'm getting to people. People are frightened. They're afraid. They're afraid if they get sick, will there be somebody there for them? If they need shopping, will there be somebody there for them? I want to make the message very clear. There's organisations out there willing and want to help. And we have the structure now put in place with the local authorities, with the Alone, and with all the national organisations that we have out there. So just make the call and the people will respond.
Laura Fletcher from
Just on your question, by the way, of timelines, as you know, the government takes its advice from the Chief Medical Officer and his team in the National Public Health Emergency Team. But I think people do need to realise that these restrictions may go on for some time. I think it's wrong to put a timeline on it. We've set an initial period, but I think it may well be that we will need to go beyond that initial deadline. But again, that'll be a decision taken with the best public health advice that we can get.
Laura?
Just some practical question in terms of the Alone helpline and its use. First of all, is the Alone helpline now going to be used not for the purpose it has been used for up to now and exclusively for this? Just some clarity on that. And a follow-on on a point you made, Minister Ring, about the Gardaí. Just before you came on, we heard the warning that Gardaí are warning that unknown people shouldn't come to your house, that you should know that people are coming to your house because there are criminals who are trying to take advantage of the situation. What kind of assurances can you offer to people that the contact that will be made to them will be made by these trusted, Garda-vetted people and not by somebody being opportunistic? So that's the practical applications. And just following up from that, Cabinet are meeting after this. It's to follow on the extension of measures. Might we see even more people finding themselves needing to avail of a service like this if we continue on in a period where people are being asked to stay home?
Well, in relation to the question you asked about Alone, yes, Alone, we have supported them financially and to take on extra staff, particularly for this crisis that we have. And Alone have already the expertise there in relation with dealing with people. What we are saying is, in relation to the Seniors Alert Scheme, we will be ringing people, but these will be people, 80,000 people that already have the Senior Alert Scheme, and we'll be asking them to make sure that they have their batteries in it, that they're up to date, that they know where they are, that they have them beside them. And again, what we'll be saying to people is, if you want support, if you want help, if you want to give your details, your telephone number, it will be given to Alone, and they will then contact the organisation that needs to be contacted in relation to support and help that they need. And, we've been, as you know, Alone and all the other organisations we have, as the authority has said, I mean, these have all already been Garda vetted. But again, I'll come back to the point that I made earlier. Your neighbour is the best person to give the help, because your neighbour is the one that they know. And we, as people are now volunteering, we also have to make sure that these are people that we know, that we can get vetted as quickly as possible to make sure that they're suitable people to be calling on people that they don't know.
So the Alone number will be used by everyone trying to access the scheme, and no one will be contacted by someone that they're not expecting.
Well, Alone will get the calls, and they will take the numbers, and they will pass it on, as will the volunteers. We have also the volunteers there that will be taking the details. They will pass it on. Like the local authorities also have a helpline there now from 8 in the morning till 8 at night. Alone, my own department are supporting the national organisations, giving them advice. And that's why we brought out the 3 brochures in the last week. And that's why today we have that brochure again, to the do-nots and the do's, because we have to be very careful. We're dealing with people now that are frightened, we're dealing with people that are alone, and we're dealing with people that, when they make that call, that they need help. And we're doing this in a very sensitive way. We have thought this out very carefully, and we're putting the resources in place to make sure that we can help the people that need help. And particularly, and this is a message I want you to get out today, is people need to know the support, the help, and people are there for them, because people are worried that they would be left alone, that they would be isolated, particularly, and neighbours, I want to say again to people, if they're going to help their next door neighbour, they have a reason to be leaving their home. And if the Gardaí, pull them, they can just say, I'm going to visit an elderly person. So just to reassure people that they're able to support one another. But look in relation to Alone, they're doing a superb job. and as with Pobble and all, the Wheel, Irish Rural Link, we have many, many national organisations, Meals on Wheels. In fact, when this is all over, and it will, and this will pass, people will see what the voluntary and community sector do for this country. Sometimes the national media don't actually see what these groups do for vulnerable people in rural Ireland. They're at this 52 weeks of the year. This is just a crisis now that we need more support, need more help. 8,500 people offered to volunteer last week, and that shows you the country that we have.
I might just ask Anne-Marie Farley as well, as one of the chief executives of one of the local authorities, to talk about the helpline.
Yeah, so there's a complete integration between the Alone helpline and the local authority helplines. And indeed, Alone were part of the initial set-up meeting of each of the fora. So they informed us as to the gaps in the supports that are available at the moment. They've been experienced those 8,000 calls over the last number of weeks. So they've had a lot of interaction with the elderly, particularly in relation to their emotional support needs and well-being needs. But they also found out from those old people that there were additional supports needed that can now be offered through the local authority helpline. So it's not that every person needing support needs to ring one or other helpline. There's a seamless integration between both, and we make sure the help reaches the right place.
Pat Leahy.
Taoiseach, can I ask, the Taoiseach mentioned a figure of 15,000 by the end of March several times over recent weeks. Now, clearly that was before taking the measures introduced into account. But is the current trajectory of the growth of the numbers of cases and presentations in hospitals, is it at a level that will be that the hospital system will be able to deal with? Or on current projections, will you reach a point over the coming weeks that will exceed hospital capacity? And on different question, the progress towards the formation of a new government appears to be speeding up. Do you have concerns about the disruption in government that would be caused by a change of several ministers?
On the first question, I think it's important to take positives when they're there. We have certainly seen the spread of this virus staying below what the expectation might have been a few days ago and certainly a few weeks ago. But I think we would be wrong to be complacent because we've seen in other countries how quickly the spread can actually accelerate. And so that is why our focus has been on as much testing as we can do, backed up by intensive contact tracing. We now have 1,400 people that are trained to work in contact tracing. We're now applying that contact tracing model to people who haven't even tested positive but have symptoms and are waiting for a test. So we're not waiting for some of the barriers to more testing to be resolved around testing reagent and so on in labs, although we are working on that. And we've also got an awful lot of extra test kits in, so that's not a barrier anymore. But I think the important thing is that the message goes out that if you have symptoms, regardless of whether you've tested positive or not, you self-isolate and you behave as if you have tested positive. And the state infrastructure that's been put in place around contact tracing now also kicks in because we know that the best advice from the WHO and from many other trusted sources is the more you test, the more you contact trace, the more you understand where the clusters are and how they're growing and developing, and the more accurate your response can be to actually contain that spread, which is the basis of our strategy. And what the CMO has been saying in recent days, which is encouraging, is that through contact tracing we now see that the number of people who have either tested positive or have symptoms have been in contact with is a lot smaller now than it would have been 10 days ago, which again shows that strategy is working and informs our National Public Health team in terms of the restrictions that they advise the government to implement. So despite some of the challenges in terms of getting to the numbers of tests that we want to get to every day, which is over 10,000, we can still do a huge amount and are doing a huge amount through effective contact tracing and through the work between GPs and their clients in terms of making sure that we are understanding where the clusters of spread are and how we respond to them. As regards our hospital capacity, as Paul Reid has said over and over again, effectively what the HSE is doing is doubling bed capacity in the space of a couple of weeks to add, if we need it, an extra 10,000 beds to the system. They're not obviously all the equivalent of hospital beds, but they are beds that can take huge pressure off the conventional hospital system to actually create space in our hospitals for patients if we see a dramatic increase in the number of people that need hospital care, as we expect we will. We don't know yet whether it's going to be enough. But what we can say is the more discipline the public shows in terms of complying with the restrictions and the guidelines that we have asked them to comply with, then the higher the likelihood that our health system is going to be able to deal with the peak of this crisis when it happens. And that is why when we say social distancing matters, washing your hands matters, complying with the guidelines that we're issuing matters, we mean it, because it's going to save lives. And it's going to allow our health system and the heroes that are working in it to be able to manage this health emergency in a way that minimizes the loss of life. So, this is serious stuff. And what we're announcing today is a development of the community response to that, if you like, to ensure that the implementation of the restrictions across the country can work for communities in their homes, and to ensure that as a result of that public discipline that I talk about, we make life as easy as possible for people if they face self-isolation in their homes. In relation to government formation talks, we had a good day yesterday with Fianna Fáil, and it's important to say that. I think the two parties are really working now to try to make an important step forward. The Taoiseach has talked about the two parties trying to agree a sort of a framework document, if you like, that I hope can be persuasive in terms of inviting other parties to join us in the efforts of designing a programme for government through these extraordinary times that can not only ensure that we can respond with authority as a government with a majority through this emergency, but we can also start planning for coming out the other end, getting people back to work, helping families and communities to heal after the scars that will undoubtedly be inflicted during this period. And of course that we can plan for the next number of years in terms of getting Ireland back to a place where we're looking ahead with optimism and confidence for the future. And that's why my belief is that Ireland does need a government that has a majority and has the mandate and the authority to be able to give leadership through this very difficult period, but also plan for what comes next. Because that is an uncertainty that I think not being able to do that leads to an uncertainty that I think the country could really do without right now, given the pressures that we face.
Okay, we just have a couple of minutes until the Cabinet Subcommittee, so final question to Hugh O'Connell.
Thank you. Can I ask, first of all, Elizabeth Canavan there at the briefing outlined that Gardaí were warning people about posing as staff from the HSE or health service staff providing tests. Have you come across any examples of this? Is this happening? Has this been reported to the government in recent days, that people are showing up at doors pretending to be staff from the HSE, providing equipment or tests or health advice? And secondly, Taoiseach, can I ask you, in light of what's going on across the globe right now, and obviously in Britain, would it now be preferable if the UK government applied for an extension to the Brexit talks this summer to allow for the space to have a more comprehensive discussion on a future trade agreement? Thank you.
Minister Ring, do you want to take the Garda question first, and then the Taoiseach?
We'll just take that land.
Yeah, I mean, I think the warnings are there because we know there's a lot of misinformation around you. Obviously on social media, as Michael Ring mentioned earlier, but also potentially on other platforms. We know there's always scammers that are out there looking to try to take advantage of people's vulnerabilities. And that's why I think the Gardaí have spoken as they have, but that's also why we're putting this structure in place, so that people know they can trust it. You know, that's why we want to thank every local radio station in the country that's going to put out the phone numbers within local authorities for people to be able to access support and services locally. That's why, as I have said throughout this emergency, people should trust conventional media here, because we need to trust people that have to stand over what they say, as opposed to anonymous messaging, which can't be trusted at this time, fully anyway. So what we have and what we're launching today now is a community call that is linking up the community and voluntary sector with a clear structure led by local authorities that people can believe and trust. And people should use it because of that. What was your second question, Hugh? That was for me, I think. Brexit.
The first one, just in relation, sure, you know criminals never go away, and they're always looking for opportunities to get the next scam, and they're at it already. People are getting calls in relation to different schemes that are not there at all. That's why with this brochure, we're telling people they're not to give away their bank details, their personal details, only to a known person to them or a known organisation. And if they're not happy that somebody gives them a call and they say they're from such an organisation, we're asking them to ring that national organisation immediately. If it's somebody that's saying they're from the County Council, that they'd ring the County Council helpline immediately to see if there's somebody there that has made contact with them. And in relation to the Gardaí, in all fairness to the Gardaí, they've been very vigilant. They're doing a superb job. When I even come into Dublin yesterday evening, the presence of Gardaí around the country is just fantastic. But I have to say, 99.9% of the people are observing, are staying at home, are doing what they're asked to do. And what we have to do is make sure that everybody works together. This is in everybody's interest, not just in the government's interest. This is in everybody's interest. We want to get rid of this virus as quickly as possible, and people are nervous or worried. And just the social media, maybe I have a hang-up about it, but some of the stuff that's been on that social media, I don't know how the people can write it, number one, and I don't know where they get the information, number two. If people are looking for information, and we can give out about the national media, the local media, they're reliable, they're good, and they have been excellent in this, and I have to compliment them. And I'm saying to people, don't be listening and watching that Facebook, because I call it the faceless book, and that's what it is, faceless. Messages put up by faceless people, that's putting up messages that shouldn't be put up in this very dangerous time and frightening time for people.
Yeah. Hugh, can I just say, I mean, social media has an important role here too, in terms of getting messages out. I think it's important to say that. But people just need to know that they're looking at a trusted source. I think that's the key thing here.
Guys, we're going to be late.
You hit out Facebook there very clearly, you've identified them. Do you think they're not doing enough in services?
They should be doing more, as far as I'm concerned. With some of the messages that I've seen up, they should be doing more. They should be monitoring more. I've seen that they have starting to block some of the messages on some of the people that are putting them up. They should be doing more. This is not ordinary times. These are different times now. And people are depending on information, and the information they get, they want it to be correct information. And look, we saw this through the election. People got away with it. And what we need to know, that the information in relation to this virus is reliable information from the HSE, from the government, and from yourselves.
On Brexit, Hugh, Yeah. Look, I mean, as somebody who was, living and breathing and sleeping Brexit for about 2 years. It's amazing how a focus and a priority changes. There aren't too many people asking me about Brexit now because we're in the midst of a national crisis involved relating to public health, and so is the UK, and so are many others. And so I would hope that the British government will be pragmatic in relation to what they seek, and that the EU negotiating team would be pragmatic also. The timelines for Brexit before COVID-19 emerged on the scene were extraordinarily ambitious and very difficult to comply with. So let's wait and see how that conversation develops. I've learned not to be giving advice to the British government from Dublin. It generally doesn't go down too well on Brexit. They'll make their own decisions as they always do, but I do think that in the medium term, the consequences of the outcome of the Brexit negotiations are extraordinarily important for Britain, for Ireland, and for the EU collectively. And I think we need to ensure that the time and space is available to be able to do that properly. And right now, there are other priorities, quite frankly, to keep people alive that should be the focus of government attention. But as I say, I'll leave the British government make up their own minds on that in terms of what they ask, but I'm pretty confident that the EU would respond generously to a request for an extension of time should that come.
Thank you, everyone. We've got to go. Thank you, Ministers.
Thanks, everyone.